The number one reason for why people hire private tutors is that they want to get some honest standpoint as to where they currently are in their learning journey. Understanding and assessing and evaluating your own progress is a pain in the neck, just believe me. So most people just go and hire private tutors because they want to know where they have to move next in order to get past that plateau that they might find themselves in. When we give feedback in a way that is dishonest or unfair, or just the main motive of which is to get approved of by our students and to come across as a friendly and lovely person, we're actually impeding our learners' progress. So in this video, I just want to encourage you to think about the feedback that you give, and I want to ask you to contemplate the place from which you give your feedback. And I'm also going to share with you a couple of tips on how to make your feedback kind and loving, but at the same time honest and effective and contributing to your students' learning success. I think there is a bit of value of sharing my own story with you for starters. When I was a novice teacher, I got so severely motivated by my need to be approved by my learner. I wanted to be approved of on all occasions, and now I feel, in hindsight, that it was exactly the thing that was preventing me from sharing my honest opinion with my students as to what their learning journey should look like from the moment that I was teaching them and on into their future. I just remember focusing on a rule that I learned in my teaching training. Apart from looking at the negative sides of my students' performance, I had to come up with at least 3 positive sides of their speaking or writing or reading or listening performance. But because I had this very codependent and severe need to be approved of by the other person, which was very psychological, mainly psychological rather than professional, I just remember focusing on the positives too much. Here is one thing that my colleagues noted about my performance as they were observing me teaching during my CELTA course. They said, "Lilia can create a fantastic rapport between herself and the learners, but she always gives out those superlative adjectives when the students share their responses with her. So for instance, she may go, 'wonderful' or 'splendid,' reacting to every comment. And although that might sound encouraging and friendly and empowering on certain occasions, on other occasions, and mostly I must confess, sharing those superlative adjectives too often will take away from a learner's self-esteem because they will stop valuing the feedback that you give them. I think we're living in a perspectival reality. So we know that all perspectives are relative, and we acknowledge that the things that we say to each other are very relative. Having said that, it's super important to get an objective view of where we currently stand. And if our teacher is unable to grade their feedback and to grade our performance as a result of that, we may start distrusting the teacher, or we may just adopt an image of being a perfect learner no matter what. And when we go and walk into a situation when our English gets assessed by a third party, for instance by a Cambridge exam, we get severely disappointed because the feedback and evaluation that we get then does not match the evaluation that the teacher gave us. And we feel there is a dissonance and we get severely discouraged. If you're a little bit like me on this "I constantly need to be approved" end of the spectrum, think about this. Your students are there for your feedback. They actually come there, they come to you because you can give them something valuable that they don't already have. You can give them that gem and make sure you do. Giving feedback does not mean you're going to be perceived as disapproving or nasty or mean by your students. On the contrary, giving honest feedback from the right place, which we're going to discuss in a moment, will communicate your professionalism even more than any optimistic remark that you may make on your students' performance. So here are some tips for giving feedback from a place of love and respect for your learner. First, make sure that you give feedback from the right place. The reason I'm emphasizing this is that many people give feedback from a wrong place. Many teachers think that we should give our feedback. Therefore, we try our best to just come up with a little bit of feedback. Even in situations when the student could have been perfect in the lesson and not much feedback is even needed. I mean, the mistake correction and things like that. In those cases, it's actually relevant to say, you were so fantastic in our lesson today. I don't think I can contribute that much to your performance today. By saying that on occasions when your student has actually been fantastic, you won't be taking away from their self-esteem. You will be actually adding to their self-esteem because you'll be serving as a mirror, communicating the truth and reflecting the truth back at them. And that is something that they are there for, and that is something that they're going to value. Many of us, though, tend to share our feedback from a place of wanting to be professional. And if this is the case for you, I want you to question your motives. Ask yourself, why do I think I need to give feedback to my learners? Do I feel I need to give specific type of feedback? What if I give no feedback at all? Can I just give the positive feedback without adding the negative feedback if my student has been actually good at what they were doing? Softening the edges is an important practice. However, I think we're taking it to a very far extreme in the teaching profession. We try to be nice so badly that very often we sweeten the pill too much. Just giving your feedback does not mean that you're disapproving of your learner. In fact, the reason why we are so careful about the feedback that we give in the teaching profession is because we derive our understanding of how people react to feedback from our everyday life. Most people on this planet Earth react very negatively to feedback. Most people don't have a healthy relationship with the feedback that we receive. Therefore, we tend to think that our survival depends on the feedback that we give and how we give it. Therefore, mastering the ways of communicating feedback to each other and helping our learner understand that our feedback has nothing to do with our assessment of them as a human being or as a self is a pivotal step. 2. Having made sure that we're giving feedback to help the learner progress but not to assert ourselves, we need to make sure that we put our feedback in very practical steps. Not only should we criticize or comment on what we think the student has done in a not so good way, but we should also provide them with practical steps that they can take to take their English performance much farther. For instance, if we notice that a student constantly drops the third person S at the end of present simple he, she, it utterances, we might suggest that he drills that form a little bit more. Or we may suggest that when he does the exercises that are related to this third person S point, he actually pronounces every sentence that he will have checked with the key out loud to practice what it sounds like in his or her own voice so that they can get used to their pronunciation of that damned thing. And if your student, for instance, isn't able to use prepositions efficiently, just maybe focusing on helping them practice prepositions would be a good step. You might actually say that to your learner. Let's do a speaking practice that focuses on prepositions specifically. Or every time when you say a wrong preposition, I will tap on the edge of a glass with my pen and you will hear the jingling sound, and that will let you know that you have made a mistake. Establish that very clear sense of direction for yourself and your student, and that will yield results. Hold a really loving and present position for your student. Make sure that you're actually present in the lesson. People can get fakeness very easily. Just check it out. I'm very sure you have a colleague or someone who you can actually sense being quite inauthentic in what they say. Maybe they're trying too hard to be professional, but you know that they're not actually being authentic. Everybody around them may be quite sure that they're being quite inauthentic in what they're trying to portray, be it confidence, authenticity, a high level of professionalism, you name it. But the truth is that human beings are very good at picking on those intuitive signals that we share with each other. So every time you wander off in your lessons, your learner will know that. Every time they wander off in your lessons, you will know that. So work on your presence prior to your lessons. Make sure you establish some mindfulness practice in your routine. Practice paying attention to your internal state, to the position of your body. Find your balance center, and every time you're communicating something, focus on that balance center and imagine that your communication rises up from your balance center. The learner will feel how balanced you are. Being around a grounded person is an incredible experience. That is something that is valued so much in our human society. Very sadly, though, at this current stage of human development, genuine presence is quite rare. But learning about genuine, grounded, open presence is going to be something that will put you onto the front line. Make sure you do that, and your students will find you indispensable. Adopt the and consciousness position. We're not living in a black or white world. Students may be making mistakes having to do with even the simplest grammar, but it's still possible that they will be highly fluent. Highlighting that for your learners is a crucial thing for a teacher to do. Make sure you don't judge your learners' levels based on the mistakes that they make depending on a certain level of English, or belonging rather to a certain level of English. For instance, we associate present simple with beginning stages of learning English, but very often advanced learners of English may just occasionally omit that third person S that we talked about a bit in this video. That won't mean by any means that they're not fluent enough or that their English is not advanced. If we give feedback from this position, when we solely focus on individual points in their grammar or vocabulary, without translating that into an overall perception of their level, that feedback will have more chances of being empowering to the learner. The reason why many of us are afraid of receiving honest feedback is that we equate receiving negative feedback with us being somehow inherently wrong. That is an attitude that you want to get past and to teach your learners to get past. By stopping making those assumptions that a mistake from a beginner's vocabulary makes a learner's English inherently low level, is going to contribute to your learners' success and confidence. The final point that I'm going to make here is that although we may be scared of receiving feedback, the reason why we're scared of receiving feedback is because when we were young, getting feedback was often equated with receiving a punishment. It's highly psychological and trauma-based. When we were young, we established a very, very fearing relationship with authority. That's the reason why people are so afraid of authority and so suspect and not trusting with authority sources in our society. That's the predominant reason why we have such a displeasure for authority and for the vertical hierarchy in our society. When we think of a person in authority, we're thinking of them as inherently unfair because in our earlier lives, we have had experiences where someone in authority, be it a parent or a teacher or someone having more influence or authority than us, exhibited unfair behaviour and authority violation with regard to us. And it was very painful, so I'm completely getting that approach. From that approach, we need to shift to an attitude where people who are more skillful at doing something than us are actually valued and respected in our society. We can absolutely appreciate and have our own area of superiority. Every one of us is a little bit superior than anyone else. But that does not mean that they're better or worse as a person than anyone else. They're just a little bit more skillful, more masterful to a degree than us when it comes to a certain skill. As someone who is always used to being excellent in a classroom, to always standing out in a classroom as an A grader, I often found myself inhabiting classrooms that were somehow proving back to me that I was a Miss Know-it-all. I selected those classrooms deliberately because they helped me think of myself as being superior and better than anyone else. But in fact, there was a point in my life when I realized a few years ago that those classrooms did not contribute to my learning that much. They were serving my agenda and they were working towards a very different purpose, which was not learning or mastering something. I started pushing myself into experiences when I did not feel superior after I realized that. And having done that, I actually felt how my learning experiences expanded my knowledge and understanding of specific issues that I was targeting in those learning situations. And that is something that I want you to encourage, to incorporate into your thinking if you can. The growth mindset, that's how many people refer to this way of thinking, is actually contributing to our learning, not taking away from it. The reason why we may be dissatisfied with giving and receiving feedback, or even fearing the word feedback in the first place, is due to those traumatic experiences that we had as children. If we're savvy enough, we may help our learners deal with those traumas if we're feeling that their relationship with feedback is a little bit dysfunctional. If we have understanding of how traumas work or how emotions work, we can guide our learners on that journey to discover the emotional experiences that those traumas were linked with. If you're not feeling very comfortable helping your student work with their emotions, maybe it would be a great practice for you to actually work on your traumas first, so that when a learner surfaces a certain emotional experience that they went through that had to do with obeying higher authority, you will actually know how to handle that situation and how to empower your learner based on that. If you like this video, please make sure you click the like button. That will help me share positive and empowering information immensely. And also share this video with a fellow teacher or someone who you feel might benefit from learning more about giving feedback in an honest and loving way. And I will talk to you again very soon. Thank you so much. I'll see you in a bit.